I always thought I had seen and felt it all. 57 years of life should have been enough to strip away surprises, to settle everything into its place, to make the days predictable safe. I had a husband who was dependable, 3 children who followed expected paths, and a home that had been the same for decades. And then there was her. She arrived on a warm Sunday afternoon, stepping out of my son's car with an effortless grace that some women are simply born with, the kind that commands attention without asking for it. I watched from the porch, my hands resting lightly on the wooden railing, my glass of iced tea beating under the weight of the Louisiana sun. James, my son, was a strong young man, built like his father had once been. Broad shoulders, a quiet confidence, and a presence that made people listen when he spoke. He had inherited his father's discipline, his sense of responsibility, and the kind of natural authority that didn't need to be declared to be understood. He had always been certain, unwavering. And now he had her name was Evelyn. She was small, delicate almost, but there was a quiet energy beneath her composure, a kind of unspoken confidence that didn't match her delicate frame. Her hair caught the sunlight, turning gold at the edges, but it was her eyes that unsettled me. She wasn't just beautiful. Many girls are beautiful. She was captivating, the kind of woman people watched without realizing why. I had expected someone sweet, polite, perhaps a little shy, a girl who would look at my son with admiration, the way young women often do when in love with strong men like him. But Evelyn didn't look at James like that. She looked at me, not with deference, not with the nervous eagerness of someone trying to make a good impression. No, Evelyn studied me, as if she was trying to understand me, and I, without meaning to, I let her. When she stepped forward, walking up the porch steps with a confidence that made her seem taller than she was, I straightened instinctively. There was something about her presence, something just beneath the surface, something I couldn't yet name. She reached out, her fingers cool despite the summer heat. "Mrs. Caldwell," she said, her voice smooth, measured. "I've been looking forward to meeting you." A simple, polite greeting, the kind anyone would expect. And yet, something in the way she said it made my stomach tighten. I hesitated just for a moment before offering the expected response. "You too, dear." That should have been the end of it. But as the evening stretched on, I kept noticing her. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when deep in thought, the way her laughter carried a knowing edge, as if she understood something the rest of us didn't. The way she moved effortlessly, as though she belonged in any room she entered. And worst of all, she noticed me watching. At first, it was subtle, a glance that lingered a second too long, a slight pause before she responded to something I said, a brush of fingertips as she passed me a dish at dinner. But as the days went on, it became something more deliberate. Once she came downstairs in the morning wearing a simple white dress. It was modest, appropriate, yet something about the way it fit her frame made me grip my coffee cup just a little tighter. She leaned against the kitchen counter beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her presence. "You always make the best coffee," she murmured, her voice light, almost teasing. It was nothing, and yet it was everything. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was reading too much into small gestures, misinterpreting moments that meant nothing at all. And yet every time our eyes met, I saw the flicker of understanding there. She knew exactly what she was doing. One evening, after the house had quieted, I stepped out onto the back porch, needing a breath of night air to clear my thoughts. And there she was. She was leaning against the railing, gazing out into the darkened trees, the warm summer breeze stirring her hair. She turned slightly when she heard me approach, offering a small, knowing smile. "Couldn't sleep?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "Just needed some space," she replied, her tone soft, thoughtful. I understood that, more than she probably realized. I stepped up beside her, resting my hands against the wooden railing. For a moment we stood in silence, the night stretching around us. "It's a lot," I said finally, glancing at her from the corner of my eye. "The wedding, the family, all of it." She exhaled softly, almost a quiet laugh. "Yeah, it is." I studied her in the dim light, the soft glow of the porch lamp illuminating the delicate angles of her face. She was too young to hold the kind of presence she did, too young to make me feel so steady. "James adores you," I said, my voice smooth, controlled. She smiled, but there was something unreadable in it. "He's a good man." The way she said it made my pulse quicken. A simple statement, yet it held layers I wasn't sure I wanted to understand. "Yes," I murmured, "he is." A pause, a shift in the air between us. She turned to face me fully then, and for the first time, I felt something unspoken settle between us. A quiet understanding. A silent acknowledgement of something neither of us had dared put into words. There are moments in life that change you. Some are loud, impossible to ignore. Others are quieter, slipping beneath your skin before you realize they've altered you. This was one of those moments. Evelyn was watching me, and for the first time, I wasn't sure if I wanted to look away. She tilted her head slightly, her lips curving just enough to suggest she knew exactly what was happening. "Good night, Mrs. Caldwell," she murmured, turning to slip back inside the house, leaving me standing there beneath the weight of the warm Louisiana night. I didn't sleep that night, and deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. "James is still sleeping," she said, her voice casual. But beneath it, something lingered, a challenge. "He works hard," I replied evenly. "So do you." I turned my head slightly, meeting her gaze, for the first time. I let her see it, the thing I had tried so desperately to conceal. Her lips parted just slightly, her chest rising with a slow inhale. And that was when I knew Shay had known all along. That night I found her in the study, curled up on the couch with a book in her lap. The others had gone to bed. The house was silent, save for the distant hum of cicadas outside the window. "Can't sleep?" I asked, my voice lower than I intended. She looked up, her expression unreadable. "No." I stepped inside, closing the door softly behind me, my heart pounding harder than it should have. "It's a lot, isn't it?" I said, nodding toward the book in her hands. "Everything happening so fast. The wedding, the changes." She exhaled softly, setting the book aside. "Yes," she admitted, "it is." I hesitated before moving closer, perching on the arm of the couch. "You know, it's okay to be nervous." She tilted her head slightly, watching me. "I'm not nervous about marrying James," she said carefully. Something about the way she said it made my breath catch. "No?" I asked. She shook her head slowly, her gaze never leaving mine. "No." A silence settled between us, thick and unspoken, yet undeniable. For the first time, I saw it for what it was, not a mistake. Not a fleeting thought, but something deeper. Something unspoken. Her fingers brushed lightly against the back of my hand. I didn't pull away. I couldn't. If someone had told me years ago that I would find myself here, in my own home, in the quiet of my own study, with my son, S, looking at me in a way that she never should, I would have laughed, dismissed it as impossible. But there was nothing impossible about the way her touch lingered. Nothing accidental about the way her gaze flickered between my lips and my eyes, as if she was waiting for permission to step closer to something neither of us should. I should have stopped it. I should have made an excuse, changed the subject, walked away, done anything except what I did, nothing. I sat there, feeling the slow trail of her fingertips, feeling the way my own body betrayed me, the way my breath hitched so subtly, I almost convinced myself she wouldn't notice. But, of course, she did. "You're nervous," she murmured, her voice soft as silk against the quiet air. There was no mockery in it, no amusement. Just quiet observation, a simple truth. "I should be," I replied, though my voice lacked the certainty it should have carried. She must have heard it too, because her lips curved just slightly. Her fingers remained barely touching my skin, as if she had all the time in the world to play this dangerous game. "Why?" she asked. An easy question, an impossible answer. I had every reason to step back. I was older, married, her mother. I was supposed to be the rational one, the one who maintained order. But none of those words found their way out, because none of them felt strong enough to pull me out of this moment. I looked at her, we looked at her, the delicate curve of her jaw, the way her hair fell slightly out of place, the way her breath was just the tiniest bit unsteady, and I knew she felt it too. "You should go to bed, Evelyn," I finally said, my voice quieter than I intended. Though my words were right, my tone wasn't firm enough, and we both knew it. She didn't move. Not immediately. Instead, she studied me for another lingering second before finally pulling her hand back, slow and deliberate, as if giving me one last chance to stop her, to tell her not to go. I didn't. And when she finally rose to her feet and disappeared down the dimly lit hallway, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Something had shifted that night. A line had been crossed, whether we admitted it or not. And deep down, I knew neither of us had any intention of stepping back. The following days passed in slow, agonizing silence. We didn't speak of it. She didn't push, didn't force a moment that couldn't be undone. But I felt her every time she entered the room, every time she moved past me, every time she looked in my direction. It was a game now silent and dangerous, and we were both playing it. One evening, as I stood by the kitchen counter peeling an orange, I felt her presence before she even spoke. "James went into town," she said casually, and I knew she wanted me to be aware that we were alone. "Did he?" I murmured, focusing on the orange, unwilling to turn around, unwilling to give her the satisfaction of knowing how much I felt her presence. She moved closer, just enough. Then, so subtly, I almost convinced myself I imagined it. Her fingertips brushed against my lower back, just barely, just a ghost of a touch. It could have been an accident, but we both knew it wasn't. I inhaled sharply. "Evelyn," I said, carefully. "A warning. A plea." "I like the way you say my name," she murmured. "And heaven help me, so did I." She reached around me, plucked a single slice of orange from the counter, and slipped it between her lips, never breaking eye contact. "Sweet," she whispered. Then she was gone, leaving me standing there, fingers pressed against the counter, my entire body aching with something I should not have felt. But I did, and there was no pretending otherwise anymore.